Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be cracking open the Cybersecurity Manager's Guide today to help you build a successful security program.
Yeah,
You know, it's tough being a cybersecurity manager.
it is.
It feels like sometimes
Yeah,
that nobody cares about security until something goes wrong.
right. Yeah, it's definitely an uphill battle. That's one of the things I really appreciate about this book. It really focuses on the art of cybersecurity, the people side of things.
Yeah, it really dives right in. Like the first line of the book, it basically says, nobody in the company really cares about InfoSec.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ouch. But is that a fair assessment, though?
Well, I think it's pretty spot on. A lot of companies don't prioritize security until after they have a breach. You know, it's only when something bad happens that everybody starts freaking out.
Right, yeah, and then they want to spend all the money. And
Exactly.
too late.
Yeah.
It's too late at that point.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the book talks about is there's a story about a financial firm that lost an unencrypted laptop with a ton of customer data. I mean, what a nightmare.
It's a total nightmare, and it's one of those things that happens way more than you might think. The book says it ended up costing them millions, not to mention the hit to their reputation. Stories like that are a good reminder that we need to be proactive. We need to bake security into the company culture from the start.
From the start.
Yeah.
And it has to come from the top, right?
Absolutely.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
But the book makes another interesting point. It says that fear has driven our practices. What do they mean by that?
Well, the security industry has a history of, relying on fear, uncertainty, and doubt to sell products. It's always the latest threat, the next big attack.
Right.
But the book argues that focusing too much on the latest tech doesn't always address the root cause of security issues.
Right. It's like putting a fancy high-tech lock on your door and leaving a window wide open, right?
Exactly. You're not really
Yeah.
solving the problem.
Yeah. The book gives this great example. A skilled social engineer can bypass even the most expensive security tools with like a handful of well-crafted phishing emails.
Right. And that happens all the time. So it's not just about the technology. It's about awareness, about training your people to be the first line of defense.
To be that first line of defense. It's almost like instead of it being a technical problem, it's more of a people problem.
100%.
Now, the book has this analogy, and I love this. They say building a security program is kind of like judo.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that analogy.
Yeah, you like that.
So explain that for me. What's the connection there?
It's about using your opponent's momentum to your advantage. Instead of forcing security on people, you got to find ways to make it part of their workflow. Empower them to own security.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Instead of, just following the rules, the book calls it giving your job away. It's a little scary.
It sounds radical, but
It does sound radical.
it makes sense when you think about how security has evolved. It used to be all about physical control. Like you had those, what are those called? Those SCIFs, the really, really guarded.
CIFs, yeah.
Where, everything is super locked down.
Yeah.
And you had manual key rotations, physical access controls, the whole 9 yards. But now everything is cloud-based. It's way more distributed. You can't control everything from a central point anymore. So we've gone from guarding rooms to securing like vast digital landscapes.
Right.
It's a totally different ballgame.
It's almost like we've got a bunch of little outposts that we're trying to manage rather than one central fortress.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that's where this whole neighborhood watch model comes in. The book talks about each team being responsible for securing their own systems and data.
Makes sense.
It's a huge shift. Right?
Yeah, that's a big change.
Yeah.
So we're going from being like the sole protectors to almost like guides and helping other teams implement best practices.
Exactly. You empower the other teams to become active participants in security, not just following rules.
I like that a lot.
And it really leads into the main idea in the book, which is building relationships.
Okay, so obviously if we're going to have these neighborhood watch folks, if we come barging in and telling them what to do, that's not going to go well.
That's not going to fly. They're going to push back. You got to build trust.
Right. How much time do you think you should spend on building relationships?
Well, the book recommends dedicating at least 25% of your time to relationship building activities, which is a lot, right?
It's a lot.
But it shows how important it is.
But it's an investment, I imagine.
It is.
It's got to pay off in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. It pays huge dividends.
Yeah.
Because when you have those relationships, you can have those tough conversations. You can talk about risks. You can work together on solutions.
Right. Right. And I imagine it makes it much easier for people to come to you, if they do see something or they're not afraid to, bring things to your attention.
Right.
There's a good anecdote in the book about the author built trust with the legal team by discovering like this hidden file share
Oh, yeah.
with a bunch of sensitive severance packages.
And it wasn't encrypted.
And it wasn't encrypted.
Yeah, no password
That's
protection.
like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's a good illustration of how being proactive, offering help, it builds trust.
And you gotta know who to trust.
Exactly.
And who you can't trust, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe not trust, but
Right.
who you need to watch a little bit more closely.
The book also talks about turning potential adversaries, like, say, the network services team, into allies through, like, collaborative penetration testing.
Yeah.
Building bridges, not walls.
Right.
Right.
That's great. Okay, so it sounds like it's not just about being a technical expert.
Yeah.
You got to be a communicator, you got to be a collaborator,
Mhm.
relationship builder.
All of the above.
Yeah.
It's a multifaceted role.
That's right. And you got to understand, how the business works.
Absolutely. If you don't understand the business, you can't align security with business goals.
Right. So we've talked about why the traditional approach to security isn't working anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and we've kind of laid out this neighborhood watch model.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you actually make this happen?
Yeah.
How do you make this a reality?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because it can't be as easy as saying, hey, you're in charge of security now.
No, it's definitely not that simple. And that's what we're going to be digging into next time.
Okay, we'll be back for part 2 of this deep dive. We'll continue to explore the Cybersecurity Manager's Guide. Thanks for listening.
Sounds good.
So we've talked about how the old way of doing security, that command and control thing, isn't really working anymore. This neighborhood watch model where everybody's responsible for security sounds great, but
Yeah.
I imagine it's got to be hard to actually put into practice.
Yeah, it is. It's a big change. One of the biggest challenges for security managers is learning to let go of control.
Yeah, it's got to be tough.
Yeah.
Right? You spent your whole career as a security guru. You have all the answers.
Right.
And now suddenly you're supposed to trust other people to do it.
Well, it's a totally different mindset. But the book makes a really good point. You can't be everywhere at once. You can't micromanage every single security detail across a whole company, especially with IT these days. It's just so complex.
So complicated, yes.
It's impossible.
So instead of trying to do it all ourselves, we need to empower others to be like security champions
Yes.
within their own teams. But okay, how do you actually do that? I mean, is there a secret? What's the secret sauce?
Well, no magic bullet, but the book does have some really practical tips. One of the key things is to clearly define roles and responsibilities.
That makes sense.
Make sure everyone knows who is responsible for what when it comes to security.
So they can't say, "Oh, I didn't know that was my job."
Exactly. You can't expect someone to take ownership if they don't know what they're supposed to own.
It's like asking somebody to guard a house, but not telling them where the doors and windows are.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. So once you have those roles defined, what's the next step?
You got to provide the support and training. Give people the knowledge, give them the tools they need to succeed.
So you're almost like a coach.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a shift from do as I say to let's figure this out together.
I like that. But, even if you get everybody on board with this whole neighborhood watch thing,
Yeah.
I imagine it's still hard to make sure everybody's doing things the same way.
Yeah.
You don't want one team being Fort Knox and another team just leaving the keys under the map.
Oh, for sure. Consistency is super important. The book talks about using governance frameworks, and security councils just to help keep things standardized, set those clear expectations, and provide a space for collaboration.
So you have some structure
Yeah, exactly.
to guide those neighborhood watch teams.
Exactly.
So everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, so it's not just hoping that everyone gets it right. You're actually putting some systems in place to support them.
I like it. Are there any risks to this neighborhood watch approach?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what happens if one team makes a bad decision?
Right.
Or maybe they just don't have the expertise.
That's scary.
It is a valid concern, but that's where the security team, our role as advisors becomes even more important.
Right.
You've got to be proactive, identify those risks, provide that guidance.
So you're like the experienced neighborhood watch captain, right? Who's seen it all and can...
You've seen a few things.
You know what to look out for.
Right, and you're there to offer support. You're not waiting for things to blow up. You're building that trust. And it really highlights how important those relationships are
Yeah.
if they see you as a partner and not as a threat.
Right. Somebody who's there to help them,
Right.
not,
Not the security police.
not yelling at them.
Exactly. Exactly.
You did this wrong.
And that brings us back to that core message, embracing the human side of security. It's not just about technology. You got to recognize that people are both the biggest risk and the strongest asset when it comes to security.
So true. I'm so used to thinking about firewalls, intrusion detection systems, all the technical stuff. I kind of forget sometimes
Right.
that it's really about the people, the humans.
At the end of the day, it's people making decisions.
Yeah.
It's people interacting with the technology.
It always comes back to that.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we create that more human-centric approach?
Well, it might sound really basic, but one of the most effective things is to just spend time with the other teams. Get to know them, understand their challenges, and just offer your support. Build those relationships.
So like actually going and talking to people,
Yeah.
not just sending an email
Yeah,
or
get out of your office.
grabbing a coffee with them.
Exactly. Have lunch. Just chat about what they're working on. And don't underestimate the power of just listening.
You mean actually listening?
Yes. Don't just wait for your turn to talk about security.
Oh, that's hard.
It is, but when you really listen,
Yeah.
you get a better understanding of their point of view.
Yeah.
And that's so valuable when you're trying to make security work for them, not against them.
This is eye-opening. I'm starting to realize that being a cybersecurity manager is about like people skills
Big time.
as much as it is about
Absolutely.
technical skills.
That's crucial.
It's not just, do you know how to configure a firewall?
Yeah.
It's, can you actually talk to people?
Yeah. Can you communicate those risks in a way that makes sense to them?
Right.
And not just talk, but listen, ask questions, be open to feedback.
It's like a whole other side of cybersecurity.
It is.
Yeah, I like that. Can't forget about our own teams. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even though we're moving towards this more distributed model, you still need a strong core team.
Of course.
You need that talent
Yeah.
to lead the charge. Building that team, nurturing it, that's essential.
What are the key things for making a great InfoSec team?
Well, technical skills are still super important.
Sure.
But you also need that communication, that collaboration. The book also talks about empathy.
Empathy. Really?
Yeah, you got to be able to understand different perspectives, build relationships, and kind of guide people.
Okay.
You don't want to be seen as the security police.
Right, right.
You're there to help.
So it's not just about being like a tech wizard. You have to be a people wizard too.
You said it. So how do you find these magical unicorns? That's the big question.
I know, right? Where do these people live?
They're out there, I promise.
Yeah.
One tip the book gives is to look for people who are really passionate about security.
Okay, so they love this stuff.
They love it. They're excited about the work. They're constantly learning, and they want to share what they know.
That's great.
And don't be afraid to look outside of traditional security backgrounds. Diversity is a huge asset.
You mean like people with a development background?
Yeah, software development, data analysis, even psychology.
Wow.
All those different perspectives bring something to the table.
Okay, so you've got your dream team. You've assembled this great group of people.
Yeah.
You can't just leave them alone.
No,
or
you got to invest in their development.
help them grow.
Exactly. Provide those training opportunities, encourage them to stay up to date, create that environment where they feel valued and respected and they can take risks and be creative.
It's almost like a garden. You have to nurture it
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
to make it grow.
Exactly.
So we've talked about building relationships with other teams, communication, building our own team. How do you know if it's working? I mean, how do we measure success? Especially in this new world,
Yeah.
the old way of measuring things.
Yeah.
It might not tell the whole story.
You're right. The traditional metrics, the number of vulnerabilities patched, the number of incidents, it doesn't necessarily tell you how effective this new model is.
Right.
So the book, it challenges us to focus on what really matters. Can your employees spot and respond to threats?
Okay.
So it boils down to two key metrics. Can they recognize a security policy violation and report it? And can they identify a phishing email?
That's so interesting.
Right. It's not about the technology. It's about, are people actually using what they know
Putting it into practice.
to make good security decisions?
I like that.
And these metrics, they really show you the security awareness of your workforce. Are they that first line of defense?
I like it. But how do you measure that? You give everybody a quiz.
No, not quite. The book does have some practical advice on how to measure these things, using simulated phishing campaigns, security awareness surveys.
Okay.
And just as important, you got to use the data you gather to actually make your security program better.
So it's not just collecting data, it's using it
Exactly.
like good.
It's taking action.
Yep.
It's continuous improvement.
Makes sense.
And you got to share those results with the higher-ups.
So you can show them that this stuff is actually working.
Exactly. You can say, hey, look, those investments we made in training,
Yeah.
relationship building, it's paying off.
Look at our scores.
And you can build support for future initiatives.
Right.
Show the value.
I like it. Before we get too excited
Yeah.
and celebrate, we need to talk about audits.
Oh, yes, audits. The word that every security professional loves to hate.
Right. It's like, oh no, here we go again.
But maybe there's a better way to look at them.
I'm intrigued.
The book argues that audits, if done well, can be a really valuable tool to improve security.
Okay, I like that.
It pushes back against this idea that the security team and the auditors are like enemies.
Right.
It's like, no, we should be working together.
I see that. Yeah.
One of the things the book points out is that sometimes audits get so caught up in the details, they miss the big picture. They focus on checking boxes, compliance requirements, but they miss major vulnerabilities.
Oh, that's got to be frustrating.
So frustrating. It makes everyone hate the process.
Yeah. Nobody wins in that situation.
Nobody wins. So the book emphasizes that we, as security professionals, need to work with the auditors, help them focus on what truly matters.
So we're almost like guides for the auditors.
Exactly.
This is what you should be looking at.
Yeah, you're partnering with them, not fighting them.
I like that. How do we do that?
Well, one thing is to get them involved early on, share your risk profile, your security goals, explain the logic behind your decisions so they understand the big picture.
Okay.
It's about transparency and being proactive.
So instead of waiting for them to show up and say, surprise, we're here.
Let's see what you've got.
Let's see how bad it is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And documentation is key.
of course.
Clear evidence. If you give them the information they need to understand your controls,
Right.
your processes, it just makes everything so much smoother.
It's like giving them the map
Mm-hmm.
instead of making them wander around in the dark.
I like that.
Right. Okay, so documentation, be transparent.
Be transparent, partner with them.
Anything else?
Yeah, communicate throughout the whole process.
Okay.
Don't just wait till the end and get that big, scary report.
Right.
Talk to them. And when you do get that report, focus on what you can improve.
Not just the negative.
Don't dwell on the negative. Use it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
I like that.
So you're turning those findings into action.
Yeah.
And you're continuously improving.
Okay, this has been amazing. We've talked about the need for a new mindset, the importance of people, building relationships, communication, building a team, even making friends with the auditors.
It's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
But it all boils down to one thing. Security is a team sport.
That's good.
It's not just the responsibility of the security team. It's everyone's responsibility. We got to work together, share knowledge, support each other.
That's a great message.
And if we do that, we can create a secure and resilient organization.
I like that. Is there more? I feel like there's more to uncover in this book.
Yeah, we still got more to cover. In the last part of this deep dive, we're going to focus specifically on the advice the book gives to CISOs.
Okay.
Those leaders who are at the top, ultimately responsible for security.
Right.
We'll talk about the unique challenges they face, the strategies they can use to be successful, and how important it is for them to keep learning and adapting in this crazy world of cybersecurity.
Looking forward to it. We'll be back for the final part of this deep dive into the Cybersecurity Manager's Guide. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive into the Cybersecurity Manager's Guide. We've covered a lot of ground, talking about how the whole security landscape is changing, how important those relationships and communication are, and the challenges you face managing security when it's not all in one place anymore. But now we're going to zoom in on the book's advice for CISOs.
Right.
Because they're the ones at the top.
Right.
Ultimately responsible for the organization's security. So I imagine they're facing a whole different level of pressure.
Oh, yeah. It's a tough job. And this book, it doesn't try to make it sound easy. In fact, it points out that a lot of CSOs struggle. The average tenure is just over 2 years.
2 years. That's not very long.
No, it's not. It's a really high turnover rate.
Why do you think so many CISOs have a hard time making things work?
Well, the book suggests it's often because they're not aligned with the organization. They try to force security measures that don't fit the company culture, or they don't build those relationships with other teams. They end up isolated. They can't get anything done.
So you can't just be a security expert.
No,
You have to be like, I don't know, a cultural chameleon or something.
I like that. You got to adapt your approach to fit the company. The book says the CISOs who are really successful, they become change agents. They influence the culture from within instead of just trying to enforce rules from the outside.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? How do you become that kind of CISO?
Well, you guessed it, relationships.
Always comes back to that.
It always does. But for CISOs, it goes beyond just IT and security. They need to build relationships with the business leaders, the board of directors, even people outside the company.
Wow, so it's like
That's a lot of
a
people.
whole other level of relationship building.
It is. It's about getting everybody on the same page about security, why it's important,
Hmm.
making sure everyone understands how security fits into the big picture of what the company's trying to do.
So how much time should a CSO actually spend on all of this relationship building?
A lot. That 25% we talked about earlier for security managers? For a CISO, it might even be more. Because it's about building trust, it's about understanding, it's about creating that shared vision for security across the whole organization.
That's a lot of time.
It is.
But I guess it makes sense if you're responsible for the whole thing, you know?
It
You
does.
got to make sure everyone's on board.
Absolutely. And you have to be able to communicate that vision effectively. You can't talk to the board about technical details the same way you talk to your security engineers.
Right, right.
The book emphasizes how important it is to communicate clearly. You got to translate those complex security ideas into something everyone can understand. You have to build a strong case for why they should invest in security.
It's almost like you're selling security.
You are. You're selling the value of security. And that ties into that whole idea of being a change agent.
Right.
You want to inspire people to care about security, not just force them to follow the rules.
Makes sense. So it sounds like being a CISO, it takes a whole different set of skills
It does.
than just being like a technical security person.
It's more than just knowing the technical stuff. And that's why the book talks about how important it is for CISOs to keep learning.
Okay.
They need to stay ahead of the game. The threats are constantly changing. New technology is always coming out.
Yeah, it's like a moving target.
It is. So you have to go to conferences, read all the industry news, maybe take some courses. You can't just sit back and relax.
Even at the top, you got to keep learning.
Always. And just like any good leader, CISOs need to build a great team.
Yeah.
You got to find those talented people, the ones who have the skills and the people skills.
We talked about how hard that is.
It's not easy. But the book's advice applies here too. Look for passion. Look for people from different backgrounds, people who are willing to learn and grow. And once you've got that team, you got to empower them. Give them responsibility, let them make decisions, foster that sense of ownership.
So it's kind of building that neighborhood watch inside your own team.
Exactly.
You're trusting them to be those security champions.
That's a great way to think about it. And that empowerment, it goes beyond your own team.
Yeah.
Because CISOs are responsible for security across the whole organization. They need to be able to rely on those neighborhood watch teams we talked about earlier.
Right, right.
It all comes back to that idea of working together, sharing responsibility.
Yeah, the team sport thing.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final piece of advice in this book. It's not just for CSOs, it's for everyone in security. Never stop learning.
That's good life advice in general.
It is. But how do we actually do that when we're all so busy? The book suggests staying connected to the technical side of things, even if you're not doing the hands-on work anymore. Read those blogs, go to conferences, maybe take a class.
So even if I'm spending most of my day, herding cats, I still need to keep my technical skills sharp.
Exactly. And it's not just about technical knowledge either. You have to stay connected to the security community. Go to those online forums, join some professional organizations, talk to your peers.
Right. Bounce ideas off each other.
Exactly.
Share what you're learning.
And don't forget about mentoring.
Oh, that's a good one.
Sharing what, helping others. It's a great way to give back and stay involved.
So it doesn't matter if you're a CISO, a security manager, or just starting out.
Right.
Never stop learning, stay connected, and remember, security is a team sport. That's a great takeaway from all of this.
It is, and it's a message that comes through loud and clear in this book. The Cybersecurity Manager's Guide, it really makes you think differently about security. It's about the people. It's about working together. It's about building a culture where everyone feels responsible for security.
I really enjoyed exploring all these ideas with you.
Me too.
We've covered a lot, from how the world of cybersecurity is changing to how important relationships are and building that culture of awareness. What would you say is like the most important thing for our listeners to remember?
If I had to boil it all down to one sentence, I'd say technology is important, but it's people who decide whether a security program succeeds or fails.
That's perfect.
It's all about the humans.
It's all about the people.
Yeah.
So invest in those relationships, build a great team, communicate clearly, and keep learning.
Well said.
That's it for our deep dive into the Cybersecurity Manager's Guide. We hope you found it useful and that you'll take some of these ideas and use them to improve your own security program. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay curious.